just been announced between Mastercard, Ripple, JPMorgan, Ondo, and honestly, it's pretty incredible. We're going to come back to this announcement and I'll tell you what I think about it. We also talk about an announcement coming from the United States around the Bitcoin reserve. We should know more in a few weeks. We also talk about the Clarity Act, Aave, some very good news around Aave and the hack that happened a little while ago. We also talk about Zcash, which is exploding. Basically, I've got a lot to tell you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Crypto Red, the crypto news channel. Let's start with the market. Bitcoin is trading at $81,000. Ethereum is at $2,300. But overall, we are still at fairly high level compared with the last few days and the last few weeks. Hopefully, Bitcoin can hold the 80,000 level, break above it again, and hopefully go much higher. No, let's get straight into the first story. As I told you, there is a major piece of news. It has just been announced, a partnership between Ondo, JPMorgan, Ripple, and Mastercard. They carried out a test, an experiment on the blockchain at the intersection between banks and blockchain technology, and they were able to do all of that on the XRP Ledger. Let me show you the press release. These are indeed the companies I just mentioned. There is Kinexys, which is JPMorgan's crypto-related division. They basically carried out kind of transfer between several entities, and the entities involved are the one I just talked about. What they demonstrated was the possibility of creating interaction and interoperability between public blockchains and the traditional financial system. One thing we can notice here is that Chainlink is absent. We often see Chainlink trying to position itself on this type of topic, but this time it was done without them. Concretely, it starts with Ripple. Ripple took tokenized assets on the XRP Ledger. The tokenized assets in question are Ondo assets, OUSG, you know, the fund that represents US Treasury bills. And your OUSG is mainly invested in BlackRock's middle fund. The BlackRock fund linked to the US Treasuries. So Ripple took Ondo tokens, or more precisely Ondo, the OUSG, like I said, and then Ripple redeemed these tokens for dollars. In other words, they carried out the conversion process. They converted the OUSG into dollars. And to do that, they relied on Mastercard multi-token network, which makes it possible to create interoperability with the traditional financial system. Then there was also a bridge used for the dollar transfer through JPMorgan Kinexys. And thanks to that, Ripple was able to receive the funds in a bank account in Singapore. You can see it here. The funds really arrived in Ripple's bank account. So the idea was to demonstrate a cross-chain, cross-border transfer across several countries. So you have the US Treasury bonds converted into dollars, ended up in a bank account in Singapore, and all of that thanks to blockchain in just a few seconds. The transfer took less than 5 seconds. So this clearly shows that public blockchains can be used by institutions to carry out this type of transaction, and that several companies can help build the bridge needed to receive dollars in the traditional banking system. This is good news for Ripple because clearly the operation was carried out on the XRP Ledger. There's nothing to say against that, but personally it makes me ask questions about intermediations. Public blockchains were supposed to reduce the number of intermediaries when we want to make transactions. And here, for a single transaction, we end up with Ondo, JPMorgan, Mastercard, Ripple as intermediaries, and actually even more than that, because in the end, what does Ondo rely on? As I said, they rely on BlackRock through OUSG. So there's another intermediaries, and BlackRock relied on Securitize to have the middle fund tokenized. So we have to add another intermediary there. Then we could also add the public blockchain where the BlackRock fund is actually deployed, but I believe they only use the XRP Ledger, so yeah, it's not another intermediary. But yeah, you get the idea that for a single transaction, we end up with at least 6 different entities that need to validate a number of things at different stages. And for me, we're moving away from the original idea of blockchain. Blockchain was supposed to enable peer-to-peer transaction, or at least reduce the number of intermediaries as much as possible. And here we're not removing intermediaries. We're adding more of them. We're basically taking the intermediaries from traditional finance and adding them to blockchains and adding crypto intermediaries on top of that, like Ondo. And honestly, I found that pretty strange. I don't know. That's not the idea I had of blockchain. That's not the idea I had of decentralized finance or RWAs and all of that. I imagined something with fewer intermediaries, not more. No, I'm not saying this is bad. It's positive that institutional players are interested in all of this. It's also positive that they're doing it on public blockchain. I've always preferred seeing this kind of things happen on public blockchain rather than going back to private blockchains, which was the big trend a few years ago. But still, it makes you think. Yeah, and personally, I'm not a huge fan of this kind of experiments. I would prefer to see as few intermediaries as possible. So yeah, but the tokens that could benefit from this news are, of course, XRP and Ondo. But yeah, like I said, what do you think about this? Do you think it's good to have so much intermediaries but rely on public blockchain, or you prefer something else? Now let's talk about the White House. We're going to talk about the White House in a moment, but just before, I have another news about Zcash. Zcash has just seen a pretty significant pump, around 30%. So what happened with Zcash? Look at this. Zcash is up more than 100% over the past month. It's pretty impressive. So what happened? Well, Multicoin, which is a very well-known investment fund, especially known for investing very early in Solana, well, they just announced that they had built a significant position on Zcash since February. That means they have confidence in the project. And it's actually quite funny to see this because Multicoin is strongly associated with Solana ecosystem, and now they're also investing in Zcash. And also the person who has probably pushed Zcash the most over the last few months, maybe even the last few years on social media, is Mert. Mert is a very influential person in the Solana ecosystem, and he has also been pushing Zcash a lot lately. So you can really feel that several people from the Solana ecosystem are now pushing Zcash, but at the same time, there are also people from the Bitcoin side who are supporting Zcash, for example, the Winklevoss twins. So Zcash is a very particular token. If I had to summarize it very simply, I would say it's basically Bitcoin, but with the added possibility of sending confidential transaction. That's the simple way to understand it. Zcash works well because the narrative is very easy to understand, and I think the privacy narrative will probably continue. But be careful because there has already been a big pump lately. So yeah, I wanted to explain what's happening with Zcash. Now, let's talk about the White House and this Bitcoin reserve thing. We have been waiting for this almost a year now. We have been waiting for a real announcement around the Bitcoin reserve. There was the initial announcement linked to the executive order that was signed, but since then, nothing major happened. And now Patrick Witt, he worked with the White House on the Digital Asset Council. He's the president of the Digital Asset Council, and he has given more details. According to him, in the coming weeks, we should get more information and possibly a major announcement around this Bitcoin reserve. So it's not dead. They are working on it. They say they're already doing a full inventory of all the crypto held by the US government. He also mentioned the hacking issue. Apparently, tens of millions of dollars were stolen from the US government by a service provider that was supposed to manage crypto assets for the government. I believe I talked about this news. It was ZachXBT who revealed this. He also said, Patrick Witt, that there were a lot of USB drives laying around in drawers containing millions and millions of dollars in Bitcoin in the government. So they are basically cleaning all of this up. But we should soon get more details about the structure, the amount of BTC, the Bitcoin reserve, and also the digital asset stockpile, the secondary reserve that include cryptocurrencies other than Bitcoin. So yeah, we should know more very, very soon. He also announced something else. He said the White House expects the Clarity Act, the crypto regulation bill, to be approved by July 4th. It's also something the market is really waiting for. We already knew that a compromise had been found between banks and the crypto companies around yield, the stablecoin yields, but now we are waiting to see the actual details. But it looks like it's coming really soon. It should arrive, like I said, by July 4th. And honestly, it would be very good if it does, because if this got approved, it would remove a lot of uncertainty around crypto regulation in the United States. And another piece of news, let's talk about Aave. There have been two positive developments that could help unlock the situation and allow hundreds of millions of dollars, actually more than $1 billion currently stuck, to be released quickly. First, Aave liquidated the hacker's position from KelpDAO on Aave. The situation, the hacker had deposited collateral and borrowed a large amount, but the collateral was still worth more than what had been borrowed, and so they could liquidate it and keep the difference and start reimbursing funds. That was a necessary step, taking control of the attacker's collateral and beginning the repayment. But of course, this also shows some of the risk around this type of platforms. I'm not saying this is necessarily a decentralization issue, but it does highlight the real risk. The community can ultimately vote to take control of a position. Now, of course, this is extremely rare, and it was done through decentralized governance. There was a proposal, tokens were used to vote, and this is how the decision was made. So what is the second piece of news? The biggest development for me is the vote to unlock the $71 million stuck on Arbitrum. If you remember, these are the hackers' funds that were frozen by Arbitrum, the layer 2, around $70 million. Well, the vote happened and around 90% of voters supported unlocking the funds and the quorum was reached. So that means we should see those funds released. The concern was that they might have to wait for a court decision to address those millions because someone sued and asked to get those millions before the victim of the Kelp DAO hack. And yeah, but now this is good news, and the situation is moving well. Now, I also have some news about Hyperliquid. This comes from Ledger, which has just integrated Hyperliquid, allowing users to trade on Hyperliquid, including leverage trade directly from Ledger and the Ledger app. However, this will not be available in some jurisdictions like UK and France. So basically, it will allow users to trade from Ledger to their wallet directly on Hyperliquid. But personally, I want to be very clear, I would avoid using features that directly integrate into Ledger. Why? Because you usually pay extra fees. With this type of integration, Ledger often take an additional fee, and those fees can be significant. The same thing applies when you see swaps directly integrated into Ledger. Personally, I would avoid them. You may not even see the hidden fee clearly because they can be included in spreads. So you might not realize you are paying more, or you might think fees are negligible. But try comparing it with the direct purchase on an exchange and you will see the difference. You are paying significant fees for convenience and for the extra layer of security. But honestly, there are ways to do it without going directly to the Ledger app. For me, the best way to use Ledger is as a device that stores your secrets securely, then connect it to MetaMask, connect it to Rabi, connect it to Phantom, and use those wallets to perform those transactions. That way you can avoid a lot of unnecessary fees. So that's what I wanted to share with you today about the latest crypto news. I hope you enjoyed the content. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you tomorrow for the next update. Bye-bye.